Welcome to another episode of BHP Book Club. I am your host, Kelly Morgan. Today I'm speaking with an award-winning photographer who is also an author who wrote a book about travel called Can't Get Here From There, 50 Tales of Travel. Our newest book club member today is Jeremiah Gilbert. I'm so glad that Jeremiah decided to be a member of the book club and come on the podcast and share his book with us. I think it's very exciting to talk about travel. I love travel. I'm so glad that he's with us today. So let's just get right to it. Welcome to the book club, our newest member, award-winning photographer and author, Jeremiah Gilbert. Jeremiah, thank you for being a part of the book club and coming on the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Very glad to be here.
You are a writer of one of my favorite subjects, and that is travel. I love to travel. I love to see different places and see if the pictures that I see in books do them justice. So I love to travel. So I'm interested to talk about your travel book. But before we go there and talk about the book, how did this book become a book?
Well, basically, back in summer of 2019, I was thinking about my current website, which mostly focuses on photography. And I thought my prior website was more travel with links to photos. And so I thought, I wouldn't mind going back to the sort of travel writing aspect, but instead of writing about complete travels, maybe I would just do some short travel tales, little incidents that happened that were funny or strange or something like that. So that was summer 2019. In fact, I was in London at the time. I'd just come back from a trip to Albania, Kosovo, and North Macedonia. And so shared the idea with my wife. She thought it was great. And within 2 days, we had a list of 60 topics. It was like, oh yeah, there's a lot we could talk about. So I just started writing them. And since they were for the website, I intended them to be, rather short. So in print, they turned out to be about 2-3 pages each. And so that was the idea. Then come 2020 and COVID. And, pretty much by February, I suspected travel was off the table. By March, I'm here in Southern California. We had, done a lockdown, work was remote, and had 2 trips coming up, one to Fiji and New Zealand, and one to Peru. Both were canceled. So I started thinking, since I can't travel, I wonder, at the time I probably had about 35 of these travel tales written. So maybe I'll continue writing them. I still had unwritten ones on my list and put them together in a collection. I went with 50 tales of travel, basically because this year I turned 50. So 50 was on my mind. And also since they were 2 to 3 pages each, I figured at 50, you got a decent size collection. So I'm a mathematician by trade. I'm a college professor of math. So I created a spreadsheet, and I sort of, each travel tale I wrote, I listed, what region it was in, what year it was in. I tried to balance things out, not too much from Asia. Also make sure there's plenty from Africa and South America. And so that just kind of spurred me on. And next thing you know, I had the 50 together. And in fact, the title, I had no title for this collection. It came from the very last piece I wrote. So February 2020, my wife was back in China because she's originally from Beijing, and she went back for Chinese New Year, and suddenly the flights were canceling. And there was a time there where I'm sitting here in Southern California thinking, I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to get her back, here. So So fortunately, after 3 canceled flights, we were able to get her home. But that's the last piece in the collection, and that turned out to be the title of that piece. I'm like, oh, okay, I really like that. So there you go, we have a title now.
So how did you publish it? Did you publish it yourself? Did you use a publisher? What did you do?
I used a publisher. Strangely enough, also in 2019, I was contacted through my website, a publisher based out of India, who mostly does poetry, had written me to see if I had a poetry collection, if I would like to submit anything to them, I should say. And so actually my first book came out in 2004, which was a poetry collection. I had up until then published 3 over the years. I happened to have a 4th collection I had never published. So I wrote back, I said, well, let me read this and see if it's any good. And if so, I'll send it to you and you can see if you're interested in it. So I pulled it out of the archives, gave it a read, made some changes, found a title for a poem that was never had a title. Thought, okay, I'll just send it and see what happens. And they accepted it and published it. So when I had the idea for this book, I thought, well, I wonder if they just do poetry or do other works. Because my first publisher back in 2004, they stopped publishing poetry like just after they published my book. So I was like, okay, well, there goes that. But I noticed they did publish some like essays and such. So I wrote them and just said, hey, would you be interested? This is a little different. This is a collection of travel tales. I sent them a couple that I had written and they said, yeah, we'll publish it. So once I got the collection together, I took a photo for the cover and sent it off to them. And a while later, they sent me the proofs, and which I went through. Because one challenge with travel writing I've noticed is some of the, I try to accurately write proper terms and use accents. But a couple, I remember I was writing about a North Korean restaurant. We went to, my wife and I and a friend of hers in Cambodia. And I happened to make note of some outfit the waitress was wearing, and that did not translate. It appeared just garbly gook on the page. So you went through and made a few corrections. But then, yeah, it came out. I was very happy with it. And in fact, I'm finalizing edits of a second collection. I'm hoping to publish it with the same publisher.
Of travel stories?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
so this book, when did you publish this book? When did it come out?
This came out September last year.
September of last year. So it's a book of travel tales, of your travel tales all over. Correct. All the different places that you've been. Can you give us some ideas of where you've been?
Well, my first major trip, when I was younger, I went with my parents up to Canada. I read in another travel collection, they were saying that, for Americans, Canada is sort of like the gateway country. We all go there, or Mexico, where I'm at. But I decided to go to Tibet. So I started late. I didn't really start traveling until I was 34. And that was basically a combination of, I had been in school, for the first, 24 years of my life, pretty much. And once I got my master's degree, I started teaching part-time. But, part-time is 3-4 colleges, working summers. So 2005, I got a full-time position at the college I'm still at, in fact. And so that summer, 2006, hey, I actually didn't have to work to, make ends meet. Summer was now an optional. So Tibet was one of those. I'd studied Eastern philosophy when I was an undergraduate, just out of curiosity. I still have a meditation practice I do. So Tibet really spoke to me. And thankfully, being naive, had no idea how long the flights were going to be, and how rough that trip was. In fact, looking back on it, I think, I couldn't do it now, I don't think. But that was the start. And then saved up some money because, of course, spent more than I should have or that I knew. And then a year later, my next trip was to Peru. And because I really wanted to see Machu Picchu. I've always been very interested in other cultures. And I have a fascination with like ancient civilizations and ruins. Because, here in Southern California, ancient civilization is like a 50-year-old building. So, that sort of thing. And then just sort of just built from there. And then it was funny, when I got to about 5 countries, I thought, maybe 10 isn't out of the question. And then, I got to number 10 and thought, maybe I might be able to hit 50 someday. And just sort of, just whatever would pique my interest. So, did a trip to Central Europe, did a trip to Morocco. That was actually my first dip into Africa, and just sort of built from there. And then I was very fortunate. As I mentioned, my wife's Chinese. She was living in London, and we met on a trip to Tunisia. And we hit it off, and we both love to travel. And in fact, once we became engaged and became serious, I asked her to make a list of all the countries she'd been to and which countries she wouldn't mind returning to. And that kind of helped us go along. Her only rule is she has to stay at least one country ahead of me. So in our country count, I have to be aware, make sure I think I'm only 1 or 2 countries behind her right now, so I have to be careful. And then she actually started to give it a little more structure. She's one of those, I'll go pretty much anywhere. She'll think, okay, we've just come from desert, so next time let's do city. Or next time let's do, or we've just come from Asia, so let's do South Africa this time, or let's do Central America. So that's been nice. And we often we'll even be sitting in the same room together, and I'll forward her a tour. But I did that this afternoon. Oh, hey, I just found this tour. What do you think? Is this something you think we'd like to do? So it's been very enjoyable. And so having this downtime now to write this collection, and then the next one has been, we can't travel right now, but it's sort of been the second best thing.
Is there any places that you haven't gone that's on your list to go to?
My biggest glaring omission is Australia. In fact, the summer after my wife and I met, I was supposed to do a 5-week tour of Australia, New Zealand, and Fiji. But I decided, I think, it's more important to spend some time with this woman I've met, and we seem to be getting along really well. So I postponed that. So in fact, last year's trip to Fiji and New Zealand was going to finally go there, then that didn't happen. And unfortunately, there's a few regions, like I would really like to go to Yemen, but it's just not safe right now. We'd both been really wanting to go to either Lebanon or Iran. Iran's hit and miss in terms of whether you can go. They had that explosion in Beirut, kind of changed things a little. Also in Africa, my boss for many years was from Ethiopia. I would really like, there's many places in Africa I'd like to go, but Ethiopia is one really high on my list. So someday, we're thinking ahead now. We're hoping maybe 2022 we can get back on the road. So we'll see.
So the book talks about things that have happened to you while you're traveling to all these different places. Obviously, the 50 tales in the first one. Is there 50 tales in the next one?
No, the next one is actually, it comes from my prior website, what I used to actually write about a full journey based on my travel journals. So the next collection is actually going to be the whole Tibet trip, the whole Peru trip. So it's a little different. So there's allusions two things I wrote about in the 50 Tales collection. Just in the 50 Tales, I went into a lot more detail versus it may have just been an aside in my journal.
Does the 50 Tales collection have pictures of where the places that you've gone to, or is it just words?
It's just text.
Just text. Okay. So my question was going to be, these 50 tales are basically things that have either happened to you or you and your wife while you're traveling. Some of them funny, some of them not so funny.
Yeah, correct. I mean, for instance, I spent my 40th birthday in Paris with no money and no ID because I'd had my pocket picked on the metro. And in fact, if I hadn't been with my wife, I'm not sure what would have happened. It happened on a Friday, and because of the July 4th holiday, I think it happened on July 1st. So I couldn't actually get my passport replaced till July 5th, which was the day we were taking the train back to London. And so thankfully, I went back to the hotel, asked them what I should do, was chastised. Why in the world did you have your passport on you? And I said, I don't know. I just sort of just grabbed everything to go, filed a police report. That was very challenging. That was a trip that taught me to, one, make sure you have a copy of all your paperwork and your passport, a photo of it. I have it up in Dropbox because I didn't even have that. I happened to remember, for something at my work, I had to send a scan of my driver's license. And so I was able to find that and sent email. And then also not to carry everything together. I used to have a travel wallet where everything went in that wallet. And now, no. Now I have a little wallet that goes in my pocket, has a few bills in it, a credit card, the passport's either in a hotel safe, or if I'm in between, it goes in my camera bag because that camera bag never leaves me. So that was one, not the most fun encounter for me, but definitely memorable. Or another time we were in Bolivia and we just finished a tour of the country. It was very enjoyable. We had 2 free days in La Paz. So we spent the first day just exploring the town. We went up the cable car, that's the highest capital in the world. We explored the witches market and did some interesting things. Second day, we thought, well, Lake Titicaca is, half's in Peru, half's in Bolivia. I'd seen the Peruvian side years ago, so we booked a tour with the hotel to take us to the Bolivian side of Lake Titicaca. It was a 3-hour bus ride, and then we got to this checkpoint, and they said, okay, where's your passport? And didn't bring my passport because we weren't leaving Bolivia. Okay, now what do we do? Because it was we had to cross over, take a ferry to take our bus over a little river, and everyone had to get out. There was a ferry for the bus and then a ferry for the people. So the guides told me and my wife, well, they never checked the bus, so I'm just going to leave you on the bus. Just sort of sit way down in the chair, and then we'll cross that way, and then you won't need your passport. And I said, well, what about when we come back to La Paz? And they said, they don't check your passport then. So it's okay. But yeah, that was a mild panic. I thought we'd gone 3 hours for nothing.
Well, the book sounds fantastic. When do you anticipate the second book being out? I've written it. I'm doing final edits right now. I'm hoping to finish that next week. My college now takes Thanksgiving week off, so I'm hoping to finish it. I have a photo in mind for the cover, so I'm going to take that. So my hope is maybe February or March of 2022. That one will be out. And in fact, just 2 days ago, I got hit with an idea for a third collection that I told my wife about yesterday. She got very excited. And again, we started making lists of ideas. But I've got to finish the second one first. So let me, I just need to finish editing it. It's so close. So the first book can't get there from here, 50 Tales of Travel, where is it available, and is there a website for it?
Yes. So if you go to my website, which is jeremiahgilbert.com, and click on books, you'll see some information about the book, and then there's a link to Amazon, and there's also a link to Bookshelf, which helps support independent bookstores. Or if you go to Amazon and just put search for Jeremiah Gilbert, I'm usually the second or third one down. You may see the poetry collection first, but it's high up there. I'm one of the only Jeremiah Gilberts on there.
Fantastic. Jeremiah, thank you so much for being on the podcast and sharing the book with us and the travel stories. And the second book sounds like it's going to be a little bit more involved. And then, of course, you said you've got an idea for a third book, but you're right. Get that second book done, then worry about the third book. I appreciate you being on the podcast and being a member of the book club. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate being here, and thank you for your time.
Thank you for listening to another episode of BHP Book Club. I have been your host, Kelly Morgan. I just wrapped up with author Jeremiah Gilbert, and we talked about his book, Can't Get Here From There, 50 Tales of Travel. He shared some of his experiences with us and all the places that he's been all over the world. I'm so glad that he decided to be a member of the book club and share with us. You can actually reach Jeremiah on his website, jeremiahgilbert.com. If you are an author and you would like to promote your book and be a member of the book club and come on the podcast, it's really simple. You just go to my website, brightheadedpublishing.com, go to the contact section, drop me a note, we'll connect. Next thing you know, you're on the podcast promoting your book. I'm so happy that you joined me today. I'm truly grateful. I cannot do it without you. Next week, I will bring you another author and another journey. But until then, keep writing.